There's a video that went insanely viral a few years ago. A humpback whale tangled in hundreds of meters of fishing net, completely exhausted, barely able to stay at the surface. A team of divers spent hours cutting it free. And the moment the last piece of rope fell away, the whale didn't just swim off. It circled back. It swam around each diver, one by one, nudging them gently with its massive body. Some of the divers were crying inside their masks. One of them later said it was the most profound experience of his entire life. Now here's the question that's been haunting biologists, animal behaviorists, and frankly, anyone who's ever watched that footage at 2 a.m. with a cup of tea going cold in their hands. Did that whale know what just happened? Did it understand that these strange air-breathing creatures with scissors had just saved its life? Or was it just confused? And the answer, it turns out, is a lot more complicated and a lot more beautiful than anyone expected. Hold my beer and let me explain. There's simple associative learning. You do X, I get Y, I'll remember that. A dog learns that the sound of a can opener means food. A rat learns that pressing a lever gives it a reward. That's not really understanding, it's pattern recognition. And almost every animal on Earth can do that to some degree, including animals with brains the size of a grain of rice, which is genuinely unsettling when you think about it. But then there's something much more sophisticated, the ability to model another mind, to understand that you have intentions, that you wanted to help, that what you did was directed at me on purpose, out of something resembling care. That's what scientists call theory of mind. And for a long time, we thought it was exclusively human. We were wrong. Let's talk about dolphins first, because dolphins are basically the overachievers of the animal kingdom, and they absolutely know it. Dolphins in the wild have been documented helping injured humans on multiple occasions. In 2004, a pod of bottlenose dolphins in New Zealand formed a tight protective circle around a group of swimmers, and kept them there for 40 minutes. Why? Because a great white shark was circling just outside. The dolphins had detected the shark before the humans even knew it was there. They herded the swimmers toward safety, then chased the shark away. Now you could argue that was instinct. Dolphins sometimes protect other species. There are records of them shielding seals from orcas. Maybe it's just a general protect small vulnerable thing response hardwired into their brains. But here's where it gets interesting. When researchers studied dolphin behavior in rescue scenarios, they noticed something crucial. Dolphins don't just react. They adapt. If a human is in distress and struggling, dolphins will position themselves underneath the person to hold them above water. The exact same behavior they use with injured members of their own pod. They're not just doing something random, they're applying a specific, learned, intentional behavior to a completely different species. That's not instinct, that's problem solving. That's generalization. And it suggests these animals have a mental model sophisticated enough to recognize that you are a living thing, that you are in trouble, and that the thing they know how to do can help you, which is honestly more than some people manage in an emergency. What makes dolphins even more remarkable is their sense of individual recognition. Dolphins learn each other's signature whistles, essentially names, and use them to call specific individuals across long distances. They've been shown in controlled experiments to remember specific humans they interacted with after gaps of more than 20 years. 20 years. That's longer than some people remember their college roommates. The dolphin is sitting there in the ocean, 2 decades later, like, oh yeah, that's Dave. He's all right. Elephants are another case that keeps scientists up at night. Elephants have one of the most complex social structures in the animal kingdom. They grieve their dead. They recognize themselves in mirrors, a test that, by the way, most animals completely fail, including your cat, who we're fairly sure doesn't even know it's a cat. Elephants form deep, long-term bonds, they cooperate to solve problems, and they have demonstrated empathy not just toward other elephants, but toward other species. There's a sanctuary in Thailand called the Elephant Nature Park. And the elephants there have done something remarkable on multiple occasions. When a caretaker is distressed, crying, sick, or in pain, the elephants come. They put their trunks on you. They rumble softly. They stand close. The sanctuary director described an elephant who walked 2 hours to reach her when she was going through a period of intense personal grief, as if the animal had sensed something was wrong from a distance no human could explain. But the question remains, is this understanding, or is it just emotional contagion? Are elephants picking up on distress signals and responding reflexively, the way a dog might? Here's what tips it for many researchers. Elephants don't just respond emotionally, they respond strategically. There are documented cases of wild elephants approaching ranger stations after being injured. Not fleeing from humans as they normally would, but actively seeking them out. One famous case involved an elephant in Kenya with a serious wound from a poacher's spear. Rangers observed it waiting near a road where vehicles regularly passed. When a conservation vehicle stopped, the elephant approached slowly, turned sideways, and presented the wound. It waited while the team treated the injury, and it came back the next day for a follow-up apparently. If this sounds completely unbelievable to you, welcome to wildlife research. This is just Tuesday for these people. There's also the remarkable story of a young elephant named Satao in Kenya's Tsavo East Park, who developed an extraordinary relationship with one particular ranger over years of peaceful coexistence. When poachers eventually killed Satao for his tusks, one of the most documented and mourned elephant deaths in conservation history, rangers reported that other elephants in the area became noticeably agitated and distressed for days. They had lost not just one of their own. They had lost, in some sense, a point of connection between two worlds. Now, we need to address the skeptics, because science doesn't let us just sit here getting emotional about elephants without asking hard questions. The main counter-argument is anthropomorphism, the tendency humans have to project our own emotions and intentions onto animals. We want to believe the whale was grateful. We want to believe the elephant understood. Our brains are wired for narrative and meaning, and we'll find it everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. And this is a legitimate concern. For decades, it was the dominant position in animal behavior research. The old guard insisted on strict behaviorism. Don't attribute mental states to animals, only describe observable behaviors. A dog that wags its tail isn't happy. It's exhibiting a positive arousal response. A crow that returns to the spot where it left food isn't remembering. It's following a conditioned retrieval behavior. This approach kept things tidy and scientifically defensible. It also gradually turned out to be wildly incomplete, because the evidence kept piling up. And at some point, the more parsimonious explanation, the simpler one, the one requiring fewer assumptions, stopped being these animals are just running programs and started being these animals actually know things. Frans de Waal, one of the most influential primatologists of the last 50 years, spent his entire career arguing exactly this. He called the old skeptical reflex anthropodenial, a systematic refusal to acknowledge mental complexity in animals simply because acknowledging it made us uncomfortable. Because if animals truly feel, truly understand, truly form relationships across species lines, then an awful lot of what we do to them starts to look very different. De Waal wasn't being sentimental, he was being rigorous. The data accumulated across decades of behavioral research pointed in one direction, and he followed it. Let's talk about crows, because crows deserve their own documentary series, their own Netflix special, and honestly maybe a seat at the United Nations. Crows can recognize individual human faces. Not just human body language, not just uniforms, actual specific faces. Research at the University of Washington showed that crows who were captured and banded by researchers wearing specific masks would scold and dive bomb those same researchers for years afterward, whenever they appeared. Even out of context, even in different locations, the crows would also recruit other crows to join the harassment. They were, in effect, sharing information about a specific individual they had deemed dangerous. This is already extraordinary. But flip it. There are well-documented cases of crows bringing gifts to humans who regularly feed them. Buttons, shiny objects, pieces of glass, the occasional earring. One family in Seattle received hundreds of tiny objects over several years from a murder of crows they had been feeding since one of the children started leaving them food as a toddler. The crows never brought gifts to strangers, only to the specific people who had been kind to them. Think about what that requires. It requires recognizing individual humans across time. It requires connecting past kindness to a current interaction. It requires intentional reciprocation. The crow is not eating the button. It's giving it to you because you gave it something. That is a social transaction. That is functionally a gift, and it doesn't stop there. Crows have been observed doing something researchers call consolation behavior, approaching a crow that has just lost a fight and sitting close to it, making soft sounds, engaging in gentle contact. This was thought to be exclusively human or great ape behavior. Crows apparently didn't get that memo. Is that gratitude? Is that empathy? Scientists are cautious about using those words, but they're increasingly comfortable saying, whatever it is, it's not nothing. Back to that whale. After the 2011 rescue footage went viral, marine biologist Nan Hauser, one of the world's leading humpback whale researchers, had her own extraordinary experience. She was diving in the Cook Islands when a 14-ton humpback started pushing her through the water with its head, tucking her under its pectoral fin, physically shielding her. She had no idea what was happening and, understandably, was terrified. Then she saw it. A 10-foot tiger shark, just meters away. The whale had seen the shark before she had, and it had moved to protect her. Hauser, who had spent 30 years studying these animals, said it was the most surreal moment of her career. But what struck her most was this. The whale had no evolutionary reason to protect her. She wasn't its calf. She wasn't even its species. The behavior was entirely outside what the whale needed to do for its own survival or reproductive success, which means, in evolutionary terms, it was essentially irrational, and yet it happened. Scientists call behaviors like this altruistic, actions that benefit another organism at a cost to oneself, with no immediate survival advantage. For a long time, biologists argued true altruism couldn't exist outside of kin selection or reciprocal benefit. Evolution wouldn't allow it, but it does exist. In humans, in dolphins, in elephants, in humpback whales who have apparently decided that protecting random scuba divers is just something they do now. There's a layer to all of this that doesn't get discussed enough, and it involves what happens before any interaction even takes place. Many wild animals have an extraordinary ability to read human body language, heart rate, and stress levels with a precision that makes lie detectors look like fortune cookies. Horses can detect elevated cortisol in human sweat. Dogs can smell fear, and that's not a metaphor. It's biochemistry. They're literally detecting the hormonal composition of your emotional state. Elephants appear to be sensitive to subsonic sounds produced by human vocal cords in distress frequencies that we're not even consciously aware we're making. What this means is that when you approach an injured wild animal with genuine calm and genuine intention to help, you are communicating something even before you touch it. The animal is reading a signal you don't know you're sending. And in many documented cases, that signal appears to matter. Wildlife rehabilitators consistently report that animals in acute distress, animals that would normally bite, scratch, flee, or fight, will sometimes go completely still when handled by someone who is genuinely, physiologically calm. Not performing calm, actually calm. The animals can tell the difference. This is not mysticism. This is sensory biology. These animals evolved to read the emotional states of other creatures as a survival mechanism, and they're applying that system to you. You walk up to a fox with a broken leg, hands shaking, heart pounding with anxiety. The fox reads that as predator, threat, fight or flee. You walk up with your nervous system genuinely settled, moving slowly, breathing steadily. The fox reads that as not a threat, and sometimes, just sometimes, it holds still long enough to let you help. And then there are the stories that sit outside any clean scientific framework. The ones researchers record, publish in careful, measured language, and then privately describe as the reason they do what they do. In South Africa, a diver named Craig Foster spent a year building a relationship with a wild octopus in a kelp forest. He visited her every day. He watched her hunt, watched her sleep, watched her grow. Over time, the octopus began to recognize him. She would approach him. She would drape herself across his hand. In octopus terms, allowing something that large to touch you is an extraordinary act of trust from an animal whose entire survival strategy is based on camouflage and escape. Octopuses have a lifespan of roughly 1 year. She died, as octopuses do, after laying her eggs. Foster returned to the kelp forest for years after. An octopus is not a dolphin. It is not a mammal. It does not have a limbic system. Its brain is distributed across its body for reasons that evolution apparently thought were a great idea. It should not, by most prior assumptions, be capable of anything resembling a social relationship with a human being. And yet there is film of it. Clear, undeniable, beautiful film of a creature from an entirely different branch of the animal tree choosing repeatedly to make contact with one specific human being. If you watched My Octopus Teacher and felt like it rewired something in your brain, you're not alone. Multiple marine biologists said the same thing. Not because the footage was sentimental, because it was data. There's also a deeply practical angle to all of this, and it's one that wildlife conservationists take very seriously. If animals can recognize individual humans, and we've established that many of them can, then the behavior of those individuals matters enormously. Conservation researchers have observed that animals in protected areas where rangers are consistently respectful and non-threatening show measurably lower stress responses to human presence over time. They become, in effect, more tolerant, more approachable. And in critically endangered species, that approachability can be the difference between successful conservation programs and total failure. In Rwanda, mountain gorilla groups that were habituated for tourism and research, meaning they were slowly, carefully, non-intrusively exposed to humans until they stopped fleeing, became demonstrably healthier over time because humans could monitor them, treat their injuries, and protect them from poachers more effectively. The gorillas didn't just tolerate human presence. In some groups, they began to actively seek it out when they were sick or injured. The animals had figured something out. These particular humans were useful. Maybe more than useful. One gorilla researcher described an aging silverback with a deep thorn wound in his foot who approached her directly, sat down, and extended his foot toward her. He had watched her treat other gorillas. He had made a connection. He wanted the same thing. That is, at minimum, observational learning applied to a social situation. At maximum, it's something that rhymes very closely with trust. So, what does this all actually mean? Here's where we land. Do wild animals know when we're trying to help them? Some of them, in some circumstances, almost certainly do. Not in the abstract philosophical sense of fully modeling our intentions and internal states, but in a practical, functional sense. They detect that something changed. They register safety where there was threat, relief where there was pain. They remember. They return. They sometimes reciprocate. And in at least some species, the great apes, the cetaceans, the corvids, the elephants, and apparently certain remarkably ambitious mollusks, there's increasingly strong evidence of something deeper. A recognition not just that something helped, but that you helped. A specific, persistent, social awareness of individual beings and their track record of behavior. Is that knowledge? Is that gratitude? Is that trust? Science is still working out the vocabulary. The honest answer is that our categories, gratitude, understanding, awareness, knowledge, were built by humans, for humans, to describe human experience. And we're now trying to use those categories to describe experiences that evolved independently in creatures with different bodies, different senses, different timescales, different worlds. Maybe the whale that circled those divers wasn't expressing gratitude in any sense we'd recognize if we could read its mind directly. But something in that animal drove it back. Something made those divers worth returning to. Something registered. Whether we call that gratitude or something else probably says more about our need for clean categories than it does about the animal's inner experience. The crow with its collection of buttons knew something. The elephant presenting its wound knew something. The octopus reaching her arm across a diver's hand knew something. The gorilla extending his foot knew something. And maybe the most important thing those animals knew, the thing they'd been trying to show us for centuries, while we stood there debating whether they were really capable of knowing anything at all, is that the line between us and them was never as clean as we wanted to believe. That whale didn't have to circle back, but it did. And that, in the end, is the whole story.